Before we dive into this emotional journey of mystery and redemption, please take a brief moment to subscribe to the channel. It helps us continue sharing these powerful stories with you. Now, let's enter Maya's world. The rain in Blackwood Creek didn't wash things clean. It just seemed to press the grime deeper into the grain of the wood. It was a cold, relentless drizzle that chilled you to the bone, a sensation Maya knew intimately. At 24, she felt the weariness of someone twice her age. The rubber soles of her waitress shoes were worn thin, offering no protection against the puddles forming in the cracked pavement of her driveway. Maya stared up at the house. It was a generous word for the structure. It was a dying Victorian, once proud, now sagging under the weight of decades of neglect and the heavy gray sky. The paint, once a cheerful yellow, was peeling in long scab-like strips to reveal gray, rotting wood beneath. The porch listed dangerously to the left, held up by cinder blocks and prayers. It was the only thing her parents had left her, aside from a mountain of medical debt and a box of old photographs. It was her sanctuary and her prison. She gripped the handle of her tote bag, her knuckles white. Another double shift at the Rusty Spoon Diner had netted her $60 in tips and a backache that throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat. $60. The property tax bill sitting on her kitchen table was for $1,200. The math never worked. It never had. Maya walked up the steps, stepping carefully over the third plank that she knew was rotted through. She reached for her keys, her fingers trembling slightly from the cold and the exhaustion. She didn't need the key, though. The lock on the front door had been temperamental for months, and yesterday, the latch had finally given up the ghost. She pushed the door. It didn't budge. Maya frowned. She pushed harder. It was locked. A cold spike of adrenaline pierced through her fatigue. She hadn't locked it because she couldn't lock it. Had the wood swollen from the humidity? Or was someone inside? She pressed her ear against the peeling paint of the door. Silence. Then, a sound, rhythmic, scraping, like sandpaper on wood. Shh, clack. Shh, clack. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Blackwood Creek wasn't a crime-ridden city, but it was a desperate town. Desperate people did desperate things. Squatters were common in the abandoned mills. But her house? It looked abandoned, sure, but everyone knew she lived here. She backed away slowly, reaching into her bag for her phone. The screen was cracked, the battery hovering at 12%. She dialed 911, but didn't hit call yet. She needed to be sure. She crept around the side of the house, through the overgrown weeds that reached her knees, moving toward the living room window. The curtains were moth-eaten lace, offering a hazy view of the interior. Maya peered inside, expecting to see drug addicts stripping the copper wiring or teenagers looking for a place to party. What she saw made her phone slip from her numb fingers and tumble into the wet grass. The living room, usually a chaotic mess of piled boxes, old newspapers, and dust, was changing. The furniture had been pushed to the center of the room and covered with what looked like clean painter's drop cloths. And there was a man. He was massive. That was the first thing her brain registered. Even from this distance, his back was a wall of muscle, stretching the fabric of a plain gray t-shirt. He had dark hair, cropped close in a military style, graying at the temples. He was on his knees, not praying but working. In his hand was a heavy-duty scrub brush. Beside him sat a bucket of steaming water that smelled, even through the glass, of industrial strength cleaner. He was scrubbing the floorboards. He was scrubbing them with a violence and precision that was terrifying to watch. He attacked the grime of 20 years as if it were a personal enemy. Maya stood frozen in the rain, water dripping from her nose. A stranger, a giant stranger, in her house, cleaning her floor. The absurdity of it warred with the fear. Was this a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation? The man stopped. He sat back on his heels, wiping sweat from his forehead with a forearm that looked as thick as a tree branch. He turned his head slightly, as if sensing eyes on him. Maya ducked below the windowsill, her breath hitching in her throat. She grabbed her phone from the grass. She should call the police. She definitely should. But Officer Miller would take 20 minutes to get out here, if he came at all. And by then, this man could do anything. But he was cleaning. Maya swallowed her fear, replacing it with a sudden, hot flash of indignation. This was her house. Her broken, rotting, miserable house. She marched back to the front door. She grabbed the knob and rattled it violently. "Hey!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "I know you're in there! Open this door!" The scraping sound stopped instantly. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then, heavy footsteps. Thud, thud, thud. The floorboards groaned under a significant weight. The lock clicked, a crisp, mechanical sound she hadn't heard in years. He had fixed the lock. The door swung inward. Maya looked up and up. He had to be 6'4". His face was a map of hard living. A jagged scar ran from his left ear down to his jawline, disappearing into a day's growth of stubble. His eyes were the color of steel, cold and impenetrable, framed by deep crow's feet. He looked like a man who had seen the end of the world and survived it, but hadn't quite come back. He blocked out the light from the hallway. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. He didn't look crazy. He didn't look like an addict. He looked like a soldier standing at attention. "You're early," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like gravel shifting in a quarry. Maya blinked, raindrops catching on her eyelashes. "I'm early? This is my house. Who are you? What are you doing?" He looked past her, scanning the yard as if checking for threats, before his gaze settled back on her shaking form. He stepped back and gestured inward. "You're letting the heat out, ma'am. Come inside." "I'm not coming inside with you," Maya shouted, backing down a step. "I'm calling the police." "I already called them," he said calmly. Maya paused, the phone halfway to her ear. "What?" "I called them when I arrived, to let them know I'd be here. Officer Miller said it was fine." "Miller said—" Maya's mind spun. "Why would Miller say it's fine for a stranger to break into my house?" "I didn't break in. The door was open. I fixed the latch. It was rusted through." He wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. "Are you coming in, Maya? Or are you going to stand in the rain until you get pneumonia?" He knew her name. The fear returned, icy and sharp. "How do you know my name?" "It's on the mail," he said, nodding toward the small table in the entry hall where her overdue bills were stacked. "And on the deed." He turned his back on her, a deliberate show of trust, or perhaps total indifference to her as a threat, and walked back toward the living room. "I have about an hour of daylight left. I need to finish the floor before the moisture sets in." Maya stood on the porch, the wind biting through her thin waitress uniform. She had two choices: run into the woods in the dark, or enter her own home and confront the giant scrubbing her floor. She gripped her keys as a makeshift weapon, took a deep breath, and stepped across the threshold. The smell hit her first. It wasn't the usual scent of damp dog hair and mildew. It smelled of lemon, bleach, and raw pine. It smelled clean. Maya didn't close the door fully. She left it cracked, an escape route. She walked into the living room, staying close to the wall. The man, this Elias, though she didn't know his name yet, was back on his knees. He didn't look up as she entered. His focus was absolute. He dipped the brush, shook off the excess, and scoured a dark stain near the fireplace. "Who are you?" Maya asked again, her voice steadier this time, though her heart was still racing. "Name's Elias," he said, not stopping. "Elias what?" "Just Elias." "Okay, just Elias. Why are you in my house?" He stopped scrubbing and looked at the stain. "Because it needed doing." "That's not an answer," Maya cried out, frustration bubbling over. "People don't just walk into strangers' houses and start deep cleaning. Are you from the bank? Is this about the foreclosure?" That got a reaction. His shoulders stiffened slightly. He turned his head slowly to look at her. His eyes were startlingly intense. "Bank hasn't taken it yet, has it?" "Not yet," Maya whispered, the shame of it burning her cheeks. "But they will." "Did they send you to clean it up for the auction? Is that it?" "No." He turned back to the floor. "I don't work for banks. I don't work for anyone." "Then why?" He sighed, a heavy exhale that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He stood up, his knees cracking audibly. He walked over to a duffel bag sitting in the corner, rummaging through it. Maya tensed, gripping her keys tighter. Was he reaching for a weapon? He pulled out a thermos. He unscrewed the cap, steam rising from it, and poured a cup of coffee. He held it out to her. "You look cold." Maya stared at the cup. I'm not taking coffee from you. He shrugged and set the cup down on the mantelpiece. Suit yourself. There's a leak in the roof, second floor, north corner, bedroom. I patched the shingles outside, but the drywall inside is shot. Mold is starting to spread behind the wallpaper. You shouldn't sleep in there. Maya's jaw dropped. You went upstairs? You went into my bedroom? I inspected the structure. The integrity of the house is compromised. He spoke like he was delivering a mission report. Clinical. Detached. The foundation on the west side is sinking. That's why your door won't close. I shimmed it for now, but it needs a permanent fix. Maya felt a wave of dizziness. This man had dissected her home's failures in an afternoon. Failures she had been trying to ignore because she couldn't afford to acknowledge them. I can't pay you, she blurted out. It was the only logic she could find. He must be a handyman looking for work, playing a high-pressure sales game. I have no money. Zero. So if you think you're going to present me with a bill for fixing the lock or scrubbing the floor, you're wasting your time. Elias looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He took in the frayed collar of her uniform, the dark circles under her eyes, the desperate set of her jaw. His expression softened, just a fraction. I don't want your money, Maya. Then what do you want? He picked up the scrub brush again. I want to finish this floor. Get out. Maya pointed to the door. I want you to leave. Now. Elias stood still. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. He nodded slowly. All right. He began to pack up. He poured the dirty water down the sink, cleaning the sink afterward, put his brush in the bag, and picked up the drop cloths. He moved with an efficiency that was mesmerizing. Within 2 minutes, the room was empty of his tools. He walked to the door. He stopped at the threshold, towering over her. Up close, she saw the faint white scars on his knuckles. Lock the deadbolt, he said softly. The bottom one. It holds better. And then he walked out into the rain. Maya slammed the door shut. She turned the deadbolt. She engaged the chain. She dragged a heavy chair from the kitchen and wedged it under the knob. She backed away, sliding down the wall until she hit the floor. She hugged her knees to her chest. The house was silent, but for the first time in years, the smell of rot was gone, replaced by the sharp chemical scent of cleanliness. She looked at the spot he had cleaned. The wood, usually dark and grimy, gleamed with a rich, honey-colored hue. It was beautiful, and on the mantelpiece, steam still curled from the cup of coffee he had left for her. Maya reached for it. Her hands were shaking. She took a sip. It was black, strong, and hot. It was the best coffee she had ever tasted. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and sudden. She didn't understand. She was terrified, yes, but beneath the fear was something else. Someone had seen the mess, and instead of judging her, they had started to clean it. The next morning, the rain had paused, leaving a thick white fog that blanketed Blackwood Creek. Maya had slept on the couch, a kitchen knife tucked under the cushion. She hadn't slept well. Every creak of the old house sounded like heavy boots on wood. She woke up with a stiff neck and a sense of dread. Had she dreamt him? She walked into the living room. No. The clean patch on the floor was stark against the rest of the dirty room. It was like a spotlight shining on her poverty. She had to go to work. She couldn't afford to miss a shift, not even for a mysterious intruder. At the Rusty Spoon, the breakfast rush was in full swing. The clatter of silverware and the smell of frying bacon usually comforted her, but today she was on edge. Every time the door chime rang, she flinched, expecting to see the giant man. You okay, hun? Maya looked up. Sarah, the diner's owner and Maya's closest friend, was pouring coffee at the counter. Sarah was 50, tough as nails, with hair dyed a defiant red. I had a weird night, Maya said, wiping down the counter. Weird how? That roof finally cave in? No, a man broke in. Sarah dropped the coffee pot. It didn't break, but it clanged loudly against the counter, silencing the nearby patrons. What? Did you call Miller? Are you hurt? I'm fine. He didn't steal anything. Maya lowered her voice. He cleaned. Sarah stared at her. He what? He scrubbed my floor. He fixed the lock. Then he left. Sarah narrowed her eyes. Was he big? Like, block out the sun big? Scar on his face? Maya froze. You know him? Sarah sighed and picked up a rag. Honey, everyone's talking about him. He showed up in town 3 days ago. Rented the old Miller cabin down by the lake. Paid 6 months in cash. Keeps to himself mostly. But old man Jenkins at the hardware store says he bought enough cleaning supplies to sterilize a hospital. Who is he? Name's Elias Vance. A voice came from a booth behind them. It was Officer Miller. He was nursing a donut and a black coffee. He looked tired, his uniform straining at the belly. Maya spun around. Miller, you knew. He told me he called you. Miller nodded, chewing slowly. He did. Called the station yesterday morning. Said he was going to the O'Malley place, that's your place, Maya, to do some repairs. Asked if there were any outstanding permits he needed to know about. And you just let him? Maya demanded, her voice rising. He's a stranger. I didn't hire him. Miller sighed. Maya, look, I ran his ID, Elias Vance, former Navy SEAL, highly decorated, honorable discharge about 5 years back. No criminal record. Clean as a whistle. Just odd. Odd? He broke into my house. Technically, Miller said, pointing a sausage-like finger. He said the door was wide open, and he fixed it. Did he threaten you? No. Did he ask for money? No. Did he touch you? No. Miller shrugged. Look, I can go talk to him. Tell him to stay away. But honestly, the guy seems like he's trying to work through some demons. Some of these vets, they come back and they don't know what to do with their hands if they aren't holding a rifle. So they fix things, or they build things. He said he knew my name from the mail, Maya said. He's observant, Miller said. That's what they're trained to be. Maya went back to wiping the counter, her mind racing. A Navy SEAL, a hero, or a ticking time bomb. Stay away from him, Maya, Sarah warned, leaning in close. I don't care how many medals he has. A man who walks into a woman's house uninvited has screws loose. Maybe he thinks he's helping, or maybe he's casing the place for something else. I have nothing to steal, Maya muttered. You have yourself, Sarah said darkly. The day dragged on. Maya's tips were meager. By the time her shift ended at 4 p.m., the sky was darkening again. She dreaded going home. She dreaded the silence. She drove her rusted Honda Civic up the driveway, the headlights cutting through the gloom. She parked and sat in the car for a moment, gathering her courage. She looked at the house. Her breath caught in her throat. The porch. The sagging, rotting porch that she had been terrified to step on for 2 years. It was straight. Fresh, unpainted timber bolstered the corners. The cinder blocks were gone, replaced by sturdy wooden beams. The steps had been rebuilt. And sitting on the top step, completely still in the gathering dusk, was Elias. He wasn't working this time. He was just sitting there, arms resting on his knees, staring out at the woods. He looked like a gargoyle guarding a cathedral. Maya got out of the car. She should be angry. She had told him to leave. But as she walked closer, she saw something else. On the new porch railing, there was a small plastic grocery bag. Elias stood up as she approached. He moved slowly, showing his hands. I know you said to get out, he said, his voice rough. I'm going. Just wanted to make sure the steps held your weight. Maya stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at the sturdy wood, then at him. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? He looked down at her, and for a second the steel in his eyes seemed to melt, revealing a well of sorrow so deep it took her breath away. Because, he said quietly, you remind me of someone I couldn't save. He walked past her, toward a black pickup truck parked down the road that she hadn't noticed before. He didn't look back. Maya walked up the sturdy steps. They didn't creak. They felt solid, safe. She looked into the plastic bag he had left. Inside was a sandwich from the deli, an apple, and a new deadbolt lock, still in the package. Maya touched the new wood of the railing. It was smooth. Someone had sanded it down so she wouldn't get splinters. She looked down the road, but the taillights of his truck had already disappeared around the bend. She wasn't scared anymore. She was captivated, and she knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that he would be back tomorrow. The weeks that followed fell into a strange rhythmic cadence, like a song with a heavy bass line but a hopeful melody. Maya stopped locking the door against him. In fact, She started leaving it unlocked, the new deadbolt he had installed gleaming like a silver promise against the freshly sanded wood. Elias became a fixture in her life, though a ghostly one. He arrived every day at dawn, his black truck rumbling up the driveway just as the sun began to bruise the gray sky with purple light. He worked with a relentless mechanical intensity until dusk. They rarely spoke. It was a silent partnership born of necessity and curiosity. Maya would leave for the diner in the morning, stepping over piles of lumber or buckets of spackling paste. When she returned in the afternoon, exhausted and smelling of grease, the house would be different. One day, the rotting floorboards in the hallway were gone, replaced by reclaimed oak that didn't squeak. The next, the kitchen faucet, which had dripped a torture rhythm for 3 years, was silent and gleaming. The day after that, the jungle of weeds in the backyard had been decimated, revealed to be a rolling patch of grass that he had mowed into submission. He never asked for a penny. He never accepted a meal, though Maya tried. She would leave sandwiches on the counter, turkey and cheese, ham and Swiss, and he would leave them untouched, or he would wrap them in a napkin and place them in the fridge for her dinner. It was his way of feeding her without insulting her pride. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Maya found herself rushing home, not with dread, but with anticipation. What had he fixed today? What broken piece of her life had he mended? It was a Tuesday when the hot water came back. Maya had been boiling water on the stove to wash her hair for months. The water heater had died the previous winter, a rusted metal corpse in the basement. She came home that evening to hear a low, steady hum coming from beneath the floorboards. She ran to the kitchen sink and twisted the handle. For a moment it sputtered air, then brown sludge, and then clear, steaming water. She stood there, watching the steam rise, mesmerized. She found Elias in the basement. He was wiping grease from his hands with a rag, kneeling next to a refurbished water heater. It wasn't new, it looked salvaged, but it was working. "Elias," she breathed, standing at the top of the stairs. He looked up, the harsh basement light casting deep shadows over his scarred face. "Found it at the scrapyard," he grunted. "Just needed a new heating element and a pressure valve. Cost me $12. $12, Maya repeated. She felt a lump form in her throat, hot and painful. "I've been freezing for a year because I didn't have $600 for a new one." "People throw away good things," he said quietly, standing up. "They think if something is broken, it's trash. Usually, it just needs attention." Maya walked down the stairs. The basement, usually a dungeon of spiders and damp earth, was organized. Boxes were stacked on pallets to keep them off the damp floor. "Why?" she asked again, closer now. "You have to tell me. You're fixing my house. You're fixing my life, and I don't even know who you are." Elias looked away, his jaw working. "I told you, I need to keep busy." "That's not enough," Maya insisted. She took a step closer. He smelled of solder and sweat and that clean, sharp soap. "You said I reminded you of someone." "Who?" He stiffened. The air in the basement seemed to drop 10 degrees. The vulnerability she had seen on the porch vanished, replaced by that steel shudder in his eyes. "Does the water work?" he asked, his voice flat. "Yes, but then I'm done for the day." He brushed past her on the stairs, moving with a speed that startled her. By the time she reached the front door, his truck was already peeling out of the driveway, gravel spraying in its wake. Maya took a shower that night. A long, scalding hot shower. She sat on the floor of the tub and cried, the water mixing with her tears. She cried for the warmth she had missed, for the kindness of a stranger, and for the haunting sadness she saw in his eyes. He was fixing her house, but she was beginning to realize that he was the one who was broken. The bubble of peace popped 3 days later. It arrived in a thin, menacing envelope with the bank's logo stamped in red ink. Maya found it in the mailbox after her shift, the red notice. She stood in the driveway, the paper trembling in her hands. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. She had 30 days. 30 days to come up with $4,000 in back taxes and missed mortgage payments, or the house Elias was pouring his soul into, would be auctioned off to the highest bidder. She walked inside feeling like a ghost. Elias was in the living room sanding the drywall where the leak had been. He was covered in white dust, looking like a phantom. He stopped when he saw her face. He turned off the sander. The silence was deafening. "What happened?" he asked. It was the first time he had initiated a conversation about something other than the house. Maya held up the letter. She couldn't speak. She just let the paper flutter to the floor. Elias walked over and picked it up. He read it, his face impassive. He read it twice. 30 days, he said. "I can't do it," Maya whispered, sinking onto the sofa he had cleaned. "I work double shifts. I skip meals. I don't buy clothes. I have $80 in my savings account." 80. She put her face in her hands. "You're wasting your time. All this work, the floors, the water heater. It's all for the bank. They're going to take it, and they're going to sell it to some developer who will probably bulldoze it anyway." She expected him to be angry. She expected him to pack up his tools and leave, disgusted that he had wasted his labor on a lost cause. Instead, she felt the cushion depress beside her. "They aren't going to bulldoze it," Elias said firmly. "Not when we're done with it." Maya looked up, eyes red. "Did you hear me? I don't have the money." "Money is just logistics," Elias said, dismissing the crushing debt as if it were a loose screw. "We have 30 days. That's a lifetime in my world." "Your world?" Maya laughed bitterly. "In your world, do you have a magic wand that prints cash?" "No," he said. "But I have assets. I have skills." He looked at her, intense and focused. "How much is the house worth?" "As is? Nothing. Maybe the land value. And if it's restored? If the roof is sealed, the foundation leveled, the plumbing modernized, the floors refinished?" Maya blinked. I don't know. Maybe 150,000. Maybe more." "Exactly." Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You can't pay the debt, but you can refinance. If the appraisal value goes up, the bank will refinance the loan. They don't want the house, Maya. Banks hate owning real estate. They want the equity." "I don't understand," she said, though a flicker of hope sparked in her chest. "We finish the house," Elias said. "We don't just patch it. We finish it. We make it the best house on the block. We get it appraised. You use the new equity to pay off the arrears and reset your mortgage. But that would take months of work and thousands in materials." "We have 30 days, Elias corrected, "and I have the materials." "Why?" Maya asked, her voice cracking. "Why would you do this? This is thousands of dollars of your own money, hundreds of hours of your labor. For a stranger?" Elias stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the darkening yard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet. From it he extracted a small, worn photograph. He hesitated, then walked back and handed it to her. Maya took it. It was an old photo, creases running through the center. It showed a young man, Elias, 20 years younger, smiling, unscarred, holding a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5. She had messy pigtails and a gap-toothed grin. She was holding a toy wrench. Her name was Sarah. Elias said, his voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance. "My daughter." Maya looked at the girl, then up at the scarred warrior standing before her. "Where is she?" "She died," Elias said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a tombstone. 6 years ago, while I was deployed, there was a fire, faulty wiring in our house. Her mother, my wife, she got out. Sarah didn't." Maya covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God, Elias." "I was halfway across the world," he continued, staring at the wall, "protecting other people's families, cleaning up other people's messes, and my own house was a death trap." He looked at Maya then. "You remind me of her, not in looks, but she was scrappy. She was tough, and she deserved a safe place to sleep." He took the photo back gently and slid it into his pocket. "I couldn't fix that house," he said softly, "so I'm fixing this one." Maya sat there, the revelation washing over her. The obsession with the wiring, the frantic scrubbing, the need to make the structure sound. He wasn't just fixing a house, he was trying to retrofit the past. He was trying to save Sarah by saving Maya. "Okay," Maya whispered. She stood up and wiped her eyes. "Okay, we finished the house." Elias nodded once, a soldier accepting a mission. "Oh, 600 hours tomorrow. We start on the roof." The pact was made, and the pace accelerated. It wasn't just Elias working anymore. It was both of them. Maya took extra shifts at the diner to pay for groceries, and every spare minute she had was spent sanding, painting, or holding a flashlight for Elias. They were a team. They ate dinner sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by paint cans. They didn't talk much about his past. He had closed that door again, but the silence was companionable now. Then the storm came. It was a classic Washington tempest, brewing off the Pacific and slamming into the coast with hurricane-force winds. The weatherman called it the storm of the decade. It hit Blackwood Creek on a Friday night. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing branches from trees and flinging them like missiles. The rain wasn't falling. It was being driven horizontally, hammering against the siding like machine gun fire. Elias was up on the ladder in the living room, finishing the crown molding. Maya was in the kitchen, organizing the cabinets. The lights flickered once, twice. Then, with a loud pop from the transformer down the road, the house plunged into darkness. "Stay put." Elias's voice cut through the blackness instantly. "I have a tactical light." A beam of intense white light cut through the room. Elias moved with practiced ease, checking the windows. "The wind is gusting to 60 knots, he said. "The oak tree in the front yard is swaying too much. We need to move to the back of the house, away from the potential impact zone." "It's just a storm, Elias," Maya said, trying to find a candle. Crack. A massive sound of splintering wood echoed from outside, followed by a ground-shaking thud. The house shuddered. "That was the oak," Elias said calmly. "It missed the house, but it took down the power line." The wind shrieked louder, a high-pitched whistling sound that vibrated in their teeth. And then came the thunder. It wasn't a rumble. It was an explosion. A crack of thunder so loud it sounded like a bomb detonating directly overhead. Maya screamed and dropped the candle. She looked for Elias. The tactical light was on the floor, rolling aimlessly. Elias was in the corner. The giant, unbreakable man was pressed into the corner of the room, his hands over his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. He was shaking, violently. "Incoming!" he shouted, his voice unrecognizable. "Get down! Mortars! Get down!" Maya froze. The thunder cracked again, shaking the floorboards. "Elias! They're bracketing us!" he yelled, curling tighter into a ball. He wasn't in Washington anymore. He was in the sandbox. He was back in the war. Maya realized with a jolt of horror that the storm triggered him. The noise, the flashing lightning, the darkness. It was a sensory replica of combat. She crawled across the floor toward him. "Elias, it's me. It's Maya." He didn't hear her. He was hyperventilating, gasping for air, muttering coordinates and names of men who were likely long dead. Maya reached out to touch his shoulder, but he flinched so hard he nearly knocked her over. He looked at her, but his eyes were wide and unseeing. He looked terrified. "I can't find her," he choked out. "The smoke. I can't find the door." He was mixing the war with the fire that killed his daughter. His two traumas were colliding in a perfect storm of panic. Maya's heart broke. She saw the little girl in the photo. She saw the man trying to save everyone because he couldn't save her. She didn't pull away. She moved closer. She grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. "Elias!" she shouted over the thunder. "Look at me! Look at the floor!" He blinked, his breath hitching. "Look at the floor, Elias! You sanded this floor! Look at the wood!" His eyes darted down. He saw the smooth, honey-colored oak. "We are in Blackwood Creek," Maya said firmly, keeping her hands on his rough cheeks. "You are in my house. You fixed the water heater. You fixed the lock. There is no fire. There is no war. It's just rain. Just rain." He stared at her, his chest heaving like a dying engine. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the recognition started to seep back into his gray eyes. The soldier faded, and the carpenter returned. "Maya," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm here," she said softly. "I'm right here. You're safe. The house is solid. You made it solid." He slumped forward, his forehead resting on her shoulder. The giant man, who could crush rocks with his hands, began to weep. He cried silently, his shoulders shaking, releasing years of held-back grief. Maya held him. She wrapped her arms around his broad back and held him while the storm raged outside. She stroked his hair and whispered that everything was okay. For the first time, she wasn't the poor girl who needed saving. She was the anchor. They sat there for hours, huddled on the floor by the light of the dying flashlight, until the thunder rolled away and the wind turned into a gentle weep. When Elias finally pulled back, he looked exhausted, aged 10 years in a single night. But his eyes were clear. "I'm sorry," he rasped. I shouldn't be here. You are exactly where you need to be," Maya said. And she meant it. But as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, illuminating the wreckage of the yard outside, Maya realized that the hardest part wasn't over. The storm had passed, but the 30-day deadline was still ticking. And now she wasn't just fighting for a house. She was fighting for the man who had rebuilt it. The storm had washed away the dead leaves and the weak branches, leaving the world scoured and raw. It had also washed away the barriers between Maya and Elias. There was no longer a question of why he was there. He was there because he had to be, and she was there because she wouldn't let him do it alone. With the storm gone, a new pressure arrived. The calendar. The red notice burned a hole in Maya's consciousness. They had 7 days left, 7 days before the bank's gavel fell. The house was structurally sound now. The roof didn't leak, the floors were solid, and the plumbing hummed with efficiency. But to get the appraisal value they needed, the number high enough to force the bank to refinance, the house couldn't just work. It had to shine. It had to look like a home, not a construction site. They needed paint, gallons of it. They needed landscaping timber. They needed fixtures for the bathroom to replace the rusted pipes sticking out of the wall. They needed money. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. The ledger she kept was a sea of red ink. She had squeezed every penny from her tips, but after buying groceries to feed Elias, who was eating enough for 3 men to sustain his labor, she had $12 left. Elias walked in. He looked terrible. The shadows under his eyes were dark bruises. He hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night since the storm, driven by a manic energy to beat the deadline. He was limping slightly on his left leg, an old injury flaring up in the damp weather. "We need 20 gallons of exterior paint," he said, his voice raspy. "And the primer. If we don't seal the new siding, the appraiser will dock us 10 grand in value." "I know," Maya said, not looking up. "I can check my truck," Elias said, patting his pockets. "I might have some cash left from my disability check." "No," Maya said sharply. She stood up. "You have bought the lumber. You bought the water heater. You bought the tools. I'm not taking your last dollar, Elias." "Maya, the mission." "The mission requires paint," she interrupted. "I'll get the paint." She walked past him, grabbing her purse. She drove into town, but she didn't go to the hardware store. She drove to a small barred shop on 4th Street, Quick Cash Pawn. She sat in the car for a long time, clutching a small velvet box. Inside was a gold locket. It had been her mother's. It was the only thing of real value she had left. The only tangible piece of the woman who had taught her to be kind, even when the world was cruel. She opened the box. The gold glinted in the sunlight. Inside was a tiny picture of Maya as a baby. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, "but a house is better than a necklace." She walked in. The transaction took 5 minutes. The pawnbroker, a man with grease under his fingernails, didn't care about the sentiment. He weighed it, tested the gold, and slid $300 across the counter. It was a fraction of what it was worth, but it was enough for the paint. When Maya returned, the back of her Civic was loaded with cans of buttercream yellow and bright white trim paint. Elias was on the porch, measuring the railing. He saw the paint cans. He looked at her, then at her neck, where the gold chain usually rested. He stopped. His eyes narrowed. He looked at the paint, then back at her bare neck. "Maya," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Where is the necklace?" "I got the paint," she said, lifting a heavy can. "Grab a brush. We have daylight to burn." Elias didn't move. He walked over to her and took the can from her hands. setting it down gently. He looked at her with an intensity that made her shiver. You sold it. I pawned it, she corrected. I can get it back, once the loan goes through. That was your mother's. This is my house, Maya said, her voice fierce. You told me we're fighting for it. Well, this is me fighting. You're giving your sweat. I'm giving my gold. We're partners, remember? Elias stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something he hadn't done since he arrived. He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile exactly. It was a smile of profound respect. A soldier recognizing another soldier on the battlefield. Buttercream yellow, he said, reading the label. Good choice. It catches the morning light. They painted for 3 days straight. They painted until their hands cramped into claws. They painted until they were speckled with yellow and white like human canvases. They painted through the heat of the day and under the glare of the floodlights at night. As the yellow paint covered the gray, rotting wood, the house seemed to take a deep breath. It stopped looking like a dying thing and started looking like a beacon. Cars slowed down as they passed. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to Maya in years stopped on the sidewalk to stare. On the 5th day, a sleek silver sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in a sharp suit stepped out. He wore sunglasses and expensive Italian shoes that looked ridiculous on the gravel road. It was Sterling, the local real estate developer, the Vulture. Maya was on the ladder, painting the trim. Elias was below, mixing a fresh bucket. Sterling walked up the driveway, wrinkling his nose at the smell of paint. Well, well, Sterling called out, his voice oily. Putting lipstick on a pig, are we, Maya? Maya froze. She looked down. Get off my property, Sterling. Now, no need for hostility. Sterling adjusted his cuffs. I see you've got yourself a handyman. Nice work. But let's be real. The bank takes possession in 48 hours. Why delay the inevitable? He pulled a checkbook from his pocket. I'm prepared to offer you a cash buyout. Today. It's enough to pay off the bank and leave you with, let's say $5,000. Enough for a deposit on a nice apartment somewhere else. She's not selling. A voice rumbled. Sterling turned. Elias rose from his crouch. He seemed to keep unfolding, getting taller and broader until he loomed over the developer. He was covered in paint and sweat, holding a metal mixing stick like a weapon. And who are you? Sterling sneered. The help? I'm the renovation committee, Elias said. He took a step forward. And the security detail. Sterling took a nervous step back. Look, buddy, I don't know what skin you have in this game, but this house is a teardown. The land is worth more without it. This house, Elias said, pointing the stick at Sterling's chest, is the finest Victorian structure in the county. It has solid oak floors, a reinforced foundation, and a heart of gold. It is not a teardown. It is a fortress. It's a foreclosure, Sterling snapped. Not yet, Maya said from the ladder. She climbed down, standing next to Elias. She felt tiny beside him, but she felt 10 feet tall. We have an appraisal tomorrow morning, and when the bank sees the value, they'll refinance. So unless you're here to grab a paintbrush, Mr. Sterling, you can leave. Sterling looked at the two of them, the exhausted waitress and the scarred giant, united in front of the yellow house. He laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. Good luck with the appraisal, he said. Old Henderson is the appraiser. He's a stickler. If there's one scratch, one code violation, one termite, he'll fail you. And I'll be waiting at the auction with my checkbook. He got back in his car and drove away. Elias watched him go. His jaw was set so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. He's right about one thing, Elias said. Henderson is tough. I looked him up. Is the house ready? Maya asked, fear creeping back in. Elias turned and looked at the structure. The yellow paint glowed. The windows sparkled. The house is ready, he said, but we have one problem. The garden. Maya looked at the yard. It was mowed, but it was barren. Just a patch of green weeds. Curb appeal, Elias muttered. It counts for 10% of the value. We need flowers. We need life. We have no money, Maya reminded him. I spent it all on paint. Elias looked at the woods surrounding the property. We don't need money. We have nature. That night, under the light of the moon, they went into the forest. They dug up wild ferns, rhododendrons, and mountain laurel. They carried them back in buckets and wheelbarrows transplanting them into the beds in front of the porch. They lined the walkway with river stones Elias hauled from the creek bed. By dawn, the house wasn't just painted. It was landscaped. It looked like a cottage from a fairy tale. Maya collapsed on the porch swing, her body humming with exhaustion. Elias sat on the steps. "We did it," she whispered. "We'll see," Elias said. He didn't celebrate. He just stared down the road, waiting for the judge. Mr. Henderson arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and a clipboard that he held like a shield. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He just nodded and began his walk. Maya and Elias stood in the kitchen waiting. It was agonizing. They could hear his footsteps overhead. Creak, thump, scratch of pen on paper. He was up there for 20 minutes. "Why is he taking so long in the bathroom?" Maya whispered, biting her nails. "He's checking the pressure," Elias said, staring at the coffee pot. "And the caulking?" "I double-sealed the caulking. It should hold." Every minute felt like an hour. Maya looked at Elias. He was standing at attention, his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the wall. He was sweating, though the room was cool. This was his mission review. If he failed this, he failed Sarah again. Finally, Henderson came downstairs. He walked into the kitchen. He looked at the floor Elias had scrubbed on his hands and knees that first day. He tapped it with his shoe. He looked at the crown molding. He looked at the new faucet. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Maya. "You've done significant work," Henderson said. His voice was dry as dust. "We tried," Maya said, her voice trembling. "The structure was listed as poor in the last county assessment," Henderson said. "Roof failing, plumbing non-functional, foundation compromised." "And now?" Elias asked. Henderson looked at Elias. He seemed to measure the man, recognizing the military bearing. "The roof is sealed to code. The plumbing is better than new. And the foundation work." Henderson paused. "I haven't seen shoring like that since I worked with the Army Corps of Engineers." Elias didn't blink. "However," Henderson said, and Maya's heart stopped. "The market in this town is soft. Even with improvements, comparable sales are low." He scribbled something on his paper. He tore off the bottom sheet and handed it to Maya. "I'll submit the official report to the bank by noon. This is your copy." Henderson nodded once, turned, and walked out the door. Maya couldn't look. She held the paper against her chest. "Read it," Elias said. Maya slowly turned the paper over. She scanned past the check boxes and the notes until she found the box labeled Estimated Market Value. She gasped. The air left her lungs. "What?" Elias took a step forward. "Is it enough? We needed 130,000. "It's not 130, Maya whispered. Tears filled her eyes, blurring the ink. "God," Elias groaned, running a hand over his face. "I missed something. I should have fixed the 215,000, Maya cried out. Elias froze. "What? $215,000? Maya screamed, jumping up and down. She ran to Elias and threw her arms around his neck. "We did it! It's almost double! The bank has to refinance! They have to!" For a moment, Elias stood rigid, shocked by the contact. Then, slowly, his massive arms came up and wrapped around her. He lifted her off the ground, spinning her once. 215, he muttered into her hair. 215. He set her down. His eyes were shining. That's a good number. It's a life-saving number." Maya grabbed her phone. "I'm calling the bank. I'm calling them right now." "Huh." She dialed the number for the loan officer, Mrs. Gable. She put it on speaker. "Mrs. Gable, it's Maya. The appraisal is in. Mr. Henderson just left." "I see it just came across my desk." Mrs. Gable's voice crackled through the phone. 215,000. That is quite remarkable, Maya. I've never seen a value jump like that in a month. "So we can refinance?" Maya asked, breathless. "Stop the foreclosure?" There was a pause. A long, hesitation-filled pause. "Technically, yes," Mrs. Gable said. "The equity is there. We can structure a new 30-year fixed mortgage. Your payments would be very affordable." "Yes, let's do it. However," Mrs. Gable said. "There is a standard procedure for a refinance of this magnitude, especially given your credit history and the current delinquency status." "What procedure?" Maya asked, her stomach tightening. "Closing costs," Mrs. Gable said. "Origination fees, title insurance, prepaid taxes. Usually we would roll these into the loan, but because your income-to-debt ratio is so high, the underwriters are demanding the closing costs be paid up front to show good faith and liquidity." "Okay," Maya said. "How much?" $2,400, Mrs. Gable said. "Certified check. I need it on my desk by 5 p.m. tomorrow, or the foreclosure proceeds as scheduled on Friday." Maya dropped the hand holding the phone. The call didn't disconnect, but she stopped listening. $2,400. She had sold her necklace for paint. She had empty pockets. She had nothing left to sell. "Maya," Mrs. Gable asked, "are you there?" Maya hung up the phone. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, crushing the joy that had been there 10 seconds ago. "We have the value," Maya whispered. "But we don't have the cash." Elias stared at the floor. He looked at his hands, rough, scarred, capable of fixing anything made of wood or steel. But he couldn't fix this. He couldn't build money. 24 hours, Elias said. "I can't raise $2,000 in a day," Maya said, her voice breaking. "I can't earn it at the diner. I have nothing left to pawn." "Sterling?" Elias said. "What?" "Sterling offered you a buyout. Maybe he'll give you a loan." "He's a shark, Elias. He wants the house." Elias walked to the window. He watched a car drive by. He seemed to be calculating, running scenarios, tactical assessments. "There is one way," he said quietly. "What way?" He turned to her. His face was unreadable, the steel mask back in place. "I have a motorcycle, a vintage Indian. It's in storage in Seattle. I restored it myself." "Elias, no. It's worth $5,000, easy." "You can't get to Seattle and back and sell it in 24 hours, Maya said. "It's a 4-hour drive each way." "I can make it," he said, "if I leave now." "You're exhausted," Maya argued, grabbing his arm. "You're limping. You haven't slept. You can't drive 8 hours." "I have to," he said. He gently removed her hand from his arm. "Sarah didn't make it out. You are going to make it out. I promised myself." "Elias, please, it's too dangerous." "Keep the phone on," he said. He walked to the door. "I'll be back with the cash by 4 p.m. tomorrow." He didn't wait for her to argue. He walked out, climbed into his black truck, and roared down the driveway. Maya watched him go, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. He was a hero, yes, but even heroes had breaking points. And as the truck disappeared around the bend, Maya felt a chilling certainty that the house wasn't the only thing at risk anymore. She looked at the yellow house, beautiful and saved, and then at the empty road. "Come back," she whispered to the wind. "Just come back." The lobby of the First National Bank of Blackwood Creek was silent, save for the rhythmic, mocking tick-tock of the large analog clock on the wall. To Maya, it sounded less like a clock and more like a countdown to an execution. It was 4:45 p.m. Maya sat in a stiff leather chair across from Mrs. Gable's desk. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She had been there since 2 p.m., hoping, praying, that Elias would walk through the glass doors. Mrs. Gable typed something on her computer, the click-clack of the keys sharp and final. She looked up over her spectacles, her expression sympathetic but firm. "Maya," Mrs. Gable said gently, "the courier for the main branch leaves at 5 p.m. sharp. If the funds aren't in the system by then, the foreclosure triggers automatically overnight. I can't stop the software." "He's coming," Maya said, though her voice lacked conviction. She stared at the rain streaking the window. "He said he would be here." "The roads to Seattle are treacherous, especially after the storm," Mrs. Gable noted. "Maybe he got stuck." "He doesn't get stuck," Maya whispered. At 4:50 p.m., the heavy glass door pushed open. Maya jumped up, her heart hammering. But it wasn't Elias, it was Sterling. The developer shook his umbrella, spraying water onto the bank's carpet. He looked fresh, rested, and predatory. He spotted Maya and smiled, a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. He walked over to Mrs. Gable's desk. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Gable," Sterling said, his voice smooth. "I'm just here to certify my cashier's check for the auction tomorrow. I want to be prepared when the property becomes available." He placed a check on the desk. It was already filled out. He looked at Maya. "You look tired, dear," he said. "You know my offer still stands. $5,000 for you to walk away. It's better than being evicted with nothing." Maya glared at him. "It's not 5 p.m. yet. It's 4:52. Sterling checked his expensive watch. "Let's be realistic. Your handyman isn't coming." He probably realized that dumping $2,000 into a stranger's money pit was a bad investment. He cut his losses. Smart man. Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek. Was he right? Had Elias driven away, realized the insanity of it all, and just kept driving? He had no obligation to her. He was a drifter. A ghost. 4:55 p.m. "I'm sorry, Maya," Mrs. Gable said, reaching for the foreclosure file. "I have to start the paperwork." "Wait," Maya begged. "Just 5 more minutes." "I have a schedule," Mrs. Gable sighed. She opened the folder. 4:57 p.m. Sterling tapped his fingers on the desk. Tick-tock. 4:58 p.m. Maya closed her eyes. She saw the yellow house. She saw the new porch. She saw the flowers they had planted in the moonlight. It was all gone. Slam. The double doors of the bank burst open with such force that they banged against the stoppers. Every head in the bank turned. Standing in the doorway was a figure that looked like he had crawled out of a swamp. Elias. He was soaked to the skin. His clothes were covered in mud. There was a smear of grease across his forehead and a fresh, bleeding cut above his eyebrow. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving like a bellows. He didn't look at Sterling. He didn't look at the security guard who had started to rise. He looked straight at Maya. He limped forward, leaving a trail of muddy water on the pristine tile. He reached the desk. His hand, shaking from exhaustion, reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick, white envelope. It was crumpled and damp. He slammed it onto Mrs. Gable's desk, right on top of the foreclosure file. 2,000, he wheezed, his voice a broken rasp. 450. Mrs. Gable stared at him, then at the envelope. She opened it. Inside was a stack of $100 bills. "Is this?" Mrs. Gable stammered. "Certified funds," Elias choked out. "Cash." He turned to Sterling. The developer had taken a step back, repelled by the sheer intensity radiating from the big man. "Get your check," Elias growled, pointing a muddy finger at Sterling's chest. "Off the desk." Sterling looked at the cash, then at Elias's eyes. He saw something there that made him very small. He snatched his check back. "Counting it now," Mrs. Gable said, her hands moving fast. 1, 2, 15, 24. The clock on the wall clicked. The big hand hit the 12. $5 p.m. Mrs. Gable typed furiously into her computer. She hit enter. She looked up and smiled. "Transaction complete," she said. "The loan is refinanced. The foreclosure is canceled." Maya let out a sob that sounded like a scream. She fell back into her chair, covering her face. Elias didn't celebrate. He just nodded once. His legs seemed to give out. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. "Elias!" Maya scrambled out of her chair and dropped to her knees beside him. "You're hurt, you're bleeding." "I'm fine," he whispered, closing his eyes. "Truck broke down, 10 miles out. Radiator blew." You walked?" Maya gasped. 10 miles? In this rain? On that leg?" He cracked one eye open. A faint, tired grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I ran," he said. Maya looked at his boots. They were ruined. She looked at the man who had run 10 miles on a bad leg to save her home. Sterling walked past them toward the door, defeated. He stopped for a moment, looking down at the two of them on the floor, the waitress and the soldier. He shook his head, unable to comprehend the logic of it, and walked out into the rain. "Why?" Maya wept, holding Elias's muddy hand. "Why did you do this?" Elias looked at the ceiling of the bank. "Because," he whispered, "I couldn't let the fire win." 3 days later, the sun finally came out. It was a brilliant golden afternoon that made the wet world sparkle. The yellow house on the hill looked magnificent. The for sale sign that the bank had prematurely placed in the yard was gone. chopped into firewood by Elias the night before. Maya sat on the porch swing, rocking gently. She held 2 mugs of coffee. Elias came out of the front door. He looked better. He had shaved, and the cut on his forehead was healing. He walked with a limp, but he was moving. He sat down on the top step, his favorite spot. Maya handed him the coffee. "It's quiet," Elias said. "It's peaceful," Maya corrected. "It's ours." She looked at him. "You know you can stay, right? The spare room is finished. It's yours, for as long as you want. Forever, if you want." Elias took a sip of the coffee. He looked out at the tree line. "I can't stay, Maya." Maya felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had known this was coming, but it still hurt. "Why? You built this place. It's as much yours as it is mine." "No," he said gently. "It's yours. It was always yours. I was just the contractor." He set the mug down and reached into his pocket. He pulled out the photo of his daughter, Sarah. He looked at it for a long time. "When I came here," he began, his voice low, "I was looking for a place to die. I'm not being dramatic. I was just done. I had failed the only person who mattered. I had the skills to save the world, but I couldn't fix a simple electrical short in my own home." He turned the photo over in his hands. "When I saw you struggling with that door, when I saw the rot in the wood, it triggered something. I thought if I could fix this house, if I could make it safe for you, maybe it would balance the scales. Just a little." "You saved me," Maya said, tears welling up again. "You didn't just fix the house. You saved my life. And you saved mine," Elias said. He looked at her, his steel eyes warm. "You gave me a mission. A soldier is useless without a mission, Maya. You let me be useful again." He stood up. "I'm not going to die anymore. I'm going to live. There are a lot of broken houses out there. A lot of people who need a latch fixed or a roof patched. You're going to help them?" "I think so. I think that's what Sarah would want." He walked down the steps to the driveway. His truck, repaired now with a new radiator, was idling. Maya ran down the steps. "Wait!" She reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, shiny object. It was a key. A brand new brass key to the front door. "Take it," she insisted, pressing it into his large, calloused palm. "You don't have to live here, but you have to know you can always come back. This is your home base. Always." Elias looked at the key. He closed his fingers around it tight. He nodded, unable to speak. He climbed into the truck. He rolled down the window. "Lock the deadbolt," he said, the old command familiar and comforting. "I will," Maya promised. He put the truck in gear. "And Maya?" "Yeah? Paint the shutters green next spring. It'll go better with the yellow." Maya laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Yes, sir." She watched him drive away, the truck disappearing around the bend, heading toward the next town, the next broken house, the next mission. Maya turned back to her house. Her beautiful, solid, safe house. She walked up the sturdy steps. She crossed the threshold onto the gleaming oak floors. She closed the door. She turned the deadbolt. Click. She was safe. She was home. And somewhere out on the highway, a soldier was driving toward the horizon, no longer haunted by the ghosts of the past, but guided by the light of the future he had built with his own 2 hands.